What's up, guys? Welcome back to Rip City Rundown, and obviously by the title of this video we were going to be talking about the recent DeAndre Ayton rumors. I did a video on this, I want to say 2 to 3 weeks ago, but I'm going to tell you why I think if the Blazers do make this move and do indeed trade for DeAndre Ayton, it could be the sign of a bad offseason, and I'll tell you why, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with DeAndre Ayton or even what we would give up for him in the first place. Before we get into the video, I want to thank MyBookie for sponsoring it. Of course, MyBookie's been a great partner with Rip City Rundown over the last month, and they will continue to be a partner throughout the future. As you see right now, you can bet on the finals, you can bet on the French Open, and you can bet on MLB, NASCAR, Stanley Cup, whatever you want. Currently, Denver opens up at its 2.5-point favorite for this upcoming Game 3. I like Denver in a bounce-back spot, to be honest, so I would take that 2.5. But the kicker for us Blazer fans, as you see on the left side, NBA draft odds soon to be released. You can bet on who's going to be the third pick of the NBA draft. Do you think it'll be Scoot? Do you think Brandon Miller will drop? Do you think it could be Amen Thompson? It could be any of those guys. If you are truly confident on one of those guys being the pick, you can go over to MyBookie and bet using code RIPCITY. If you do use code RIPCITY, you can get a welcome bonus up to $1,000. That is code RIPCITY. Live lines, everything you want on MyBookie. If you haven't checked out our Best Bet series, go check that out, as we are 10-1 in our last 11, all lines, all odds on MyBookie. So use code RIPCITY to get yourself some free money on MyBookie and get in on the betting action for the rest of the NBA Finals and more sports to come. Let's get back into the video. So yes, make sure to go use MyBookie and use code RIPCITY. Links in the top comment. So DeAndre Ayton, he is making currently $30 million and making up to $35 million in 2025-2026. And for how he's been playing, for what he's been doing with the Suns, he probably is not worth that money right now. I do think there's a chance he could play his way into that money if he gets on a new team, but that's no guarantee, and we can't just bank on him doing that, even though he was a first overall pick. So if you obviously move for Ayton, you are paying a guy $30 million. You're already going into next season. You're going to be paying Dame $42 million, and then obviously that's going to get higher and higher as the years go on. You're probably going to be paying Jeremy Grant $30 million if you re-sign him somewhere around there. And then if you're wanting to go get one of these star players, a Pascal Siakam or a Jaylen Brown, you're going to be paying them north of $40 million. So that's about $142 million, $140 million roughly for 4 people on the team. That is probably not the best way to build a championship team, especially if one of those guys is DeAndre Ayton. And even Jeremy Grant, who's going to be making $30 million. That's a lot for 4 people that probably aren't a guaranteed contender. I think that team could be really good, but you're going to have to fill in the holes with vet men's, with minimum contract players, and I don't think you're getting good minimum contract players to come to Portland. So that's the first thing. And then also, if you're trading for Ayton, you're probably trading some of that minimum contract depth. I think a trade for Ayton would look around Nurkic, maybe Little or Keon Johnson, and then that 23rd overall pick who could have been one of those guys to come in, be an impact player on a minimum contract, on a low rookie contract. So you're going to have to fill in the holes with not so great players, if we're being honest. Now, I do think the only scenario where you do trade for DeAndre Ayton and it still ends up being a good offseason is if you pair him with his former teammate and you bring in Mikal Bridges as well, because Mikal Bridges is only making $21 million a year. Then you're paying Dame your $40+ million, and then you have no one else above $33 million, assuming Grant signs underneath that. You're going to have Ayton for 30, you're going to have Grant for around 30, and then you have Mikal for 20. Then you've got a little more cap space, a little more room to work around the edges. You're not as tied down to those 4 players, and that's it, like you are in other deals. I do think it's good that the Blazers are having talks and are interested in considering Ayton, because I think that's what they should be doing with all players in the league practically that could give impact to winning basketball. I think they should be interested in Pascal Siakam. They should be interested in OG Anunoby. They should be interested in Draymond Green. They should be interested in Dante DiVincenzo in free agency. You've got to do your due diligence on about every single player and figure out what you need to give up to get those, or how much you need to pay to get those type of players. If there's a scenario where you have to trade the 3rd overall pick for OG Anunoby, but you don't have to trade the 3rd overall pick for Ayton, I would probably rather go for the Ayton deal. If you have to trade Shaedon Sharpe in a Jaylen Brown deal, but you don't have to in Siakam, even though I like Jaylen Brown more, I'm trading for Pascal Siakam because it's all about asset management at this point. I do think, I've said in previous videos, DeAndre Ayton could unlock a little more potential if he were to come to Portland. However, that contract is a real stinker. $30 million in a couple years probably won't look too bad, but if we're going in for this all-in type of thing where we are trading the third overall pick for a star or a all-star caliber player and we are trying to win in the next couple years, all that matters really is the next couple years in terms of contracts and in terms of salary cap and how that looks. You're obviously nowhere near trading for DeAndre Ayton. If you're trading a guy like Anthony, if you're trading the third pick, the only way you trade for DeAndre Ayton is if it requires Nurkic, one of your lower level young players, such as a Nasir Little, Keon Johnson, so on and so forth, that level of player, and then one first round pick that isn't the third pick, whether that's you somehow unlock your future picks with the Bulls or you trade that 23rd overall pick that was the Knicks pick. And then you use your third pick, you use Anthony Simons, you use your other assets to go get that star. And I do think if you are trading for DeAndre Ayton, the only star you should probably be focusing on is Mikal Bridges. If you have that Mikal Bridges deal lined up, I think you should pull the trigger on DeAndre Ayton. I have no reason to believe they had bad chemistry issues. I think it was Ayton with probably Booker, with Chris Paul, with the coaching staff, with the entire organization of the Suns. But Mikal Bridges seems like he was the most likable guy in that locker room over the last couple years. So I think they would still gel perfectly together. And then you got a starting lineup. You're running out Dame, Sharp, Bridges, Grant, Ayton. Now, if that is your starting lineup, you struggle in the rebounding department a good bit, so you would have to shore up that rebounding in any depth move you make around the edges. Or you're trading because you have full belief in DeAndre and that he can live up to not necessarily that first overall pick status, but that all-star caliber player status. Because if you look back in 2021 on that playoff run, he was playing at that level. You could argue he was the second best player on the Suns behind Booker. He was probably better than Chris Paul in that run. Chris Paul dealt with injuries a little bit. But again, I will restate this. If you are trading for DeAndre Ayton, if you do have interest in him, I have to think you have to go get Mikal Bridges. You cannot be paying 4 people over $140 million if those 4 people aren't all top 30 players in the league. Because Ayton and Grant, unfortunately, aren't. Grant for the next couple years might be overpaid. It might be a little bit like Simons, where we signed him to that 4-year, $100 million contract. He's probably not worth $25 million right now, right when he signed it. But in a year, that contract will look pretty good. That'll be the case probably with Jeremy Grant in a couple years. But you never know. I mean, he brings the defense. He brings the offensive skill set that's good around Dame. I mean, he clearly played well with Dame this year. And so I think you do re-sign Grant. You give him the $30 million that he probably deserves. And then obviously you go from there. If you're trading for a Jaylen Brown, you don't go after a DeAndre Ayton because you then should go around and try to target good quality players such as OG Anunoby. Now, I do think that's another scenario where the Blazers could do something like this, where say they unlock the Bulls picks with a couple seconds because the Bulls are stripped of assets. You trade Nurk, the Knicks pick, and Nasir Little for Ayton, and then you trade Anthony and a first-round pick for OG Anunoby, or Anthony for OG Anunoby straight up, and then you keep the third pick, you draft Scoot Henderson, or you draft Brandon Miller, and then you're going into the next year with Damian Lillard, Scooter Brandon Miller, Shaedon Sharp, OG Anunoby, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton. That's a pretty good 6-man tandem, and then you still have your possible MLE, you still have a possible TPE, and you have some minimum contracts you could go and get just to fill the holes. That's an interesting scenario. I just do think if, like I continue to say in this video, if you're trading for DeAndre Ayton, you're probably not, or you probably shouldn't trade for one of those star players, all-star caliber players, the tier above the Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby. I think Mikal Bridges is on the best contract in the league, and if you get him, you're going to have a good offseason no matter what. Really, no matter what you give up, unless you're trading Shaedon Sharp in that deal. So that's my thoughts on the DeAndre Ayton rumors. I think it's interesting, but I think you got to be smart if you're going after a guy like him. He is an upgrade from Nurkic, objectively, but that contract's a little scary, and it'll be interesting to see what they would do if they did get him, what they would do around the edges, and what they would do. If that would be their premium pickup, that would be a bad offseason for sure. So comment what you think about Ayton. I mean, would you be interested? Are you just all out with him with his past issues in the playoffs? But let me know. See you guys in the next video. And we are now just under 2 weeks until the NBA draft. It's going to be a great time. It's going to be fun. Biggest night of the offseason. I'm so ready for it. See you in the next video, guys. Peace.